Hi there, boys and girls. I'm Pastor Charles, and welcome to another weekly Bible story. Now, as you have probably noticed, we are not where we usually have our Bible stories at. Some of you are probably thinking, Pastor Charles, where did they take you? Where are you? Well, don't worry. I haven't been kidnapped. In fact, I'm at my house right now. Many of you know Mrs. Amanda, my wife. Mrs. Amanda was not feeling very well yesterday, and so we decided that just in case she was sick, and just in case she might get worse, we would stay home for a day just to keep an eye on her, make sure that she didn't get worse, and see if she got better. And thank goodness, praise God, she has gotten a lot better today, and we're planning on more than likely going back to regular life tomorrow. And by the time you watch this, you've probably already seen us at church. You've probably maybe even seen us at like the grocery store or something. She's doing that much better. But I had a lot of things going on this week, and I only had one day left with which to record our Bible story, and it just so happens to be the day that I'm staying at home. So, if it's okay with you, we're going to do our Bible story in kind of a different environment today. Just thank you so much for understanding and being patient. Now, let's get into what we talked about last week. Last week, we talked about control. Specifically, we talked about how you and I, we can't control God. God does his own thing, but there are things that we can control, like video game characters on a screen. We punch the buttons and we move the dials, and the character on the screen does whatever we want. Or even a puppet is something that we can control. So last week I asked you guys to send in things that you like to control, either video games that you like to play or puppets you like to play with, and here's what you guys sent in. The Lordos sent in a bunch of video games that they like to play, and they all have some pretty super titles, like Super Mega Baseball 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I have that game. That's a pretty fun one. Super Mario Odyssey. See what I did there? All three of them are pretty super games. So good choice, guys. And then Caleb Bearclaw, he sent in this really old game called Centipede. I mean, Centipede is so old, it's older than me. That's pretty old. But then his sister Anna, she doesn't like to play with video games, so instead, she wanted to show us the puppet that she has as a toy, and that's a pretty cool puppet. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks to everyone for sending in the things that you like to control. But we got one more submission that I wanted to share. Somebody dropped off at the church a picture that they drew. Here's the picture. You ready? It has a note that says, Pastor Charles, I love your classes. Every week we draw portraits of you and the drawings on the whiteboard. I gotta be honest with you. You're a way better artist than me. You should be drawing on the whiteboard, and I should just be doing I don't know what. So thank you for sending that in. It made my day. So thank you very much. And let's get into this week's stuff, shall we? I got 3 things that I want you to do. Are you ready? I want you to move across the room. That's number 1. Number 2, I want you to move to either the refrigerator or the cupboard, the pantry, whatever, wherever it is you keep your food, and get a snack out. All right, that's number 2. Number 3, I want you to take that snack, sit in a chair, and then eat it. All right, sound good? Okay, here we go. And wait. I actually forgot something. Something very important. I want you to do all 3 of those things without using your legs. Oh, yeah. I want you to move across the room, the whole room, not using your legs once. You have to pull yourself across the room with your arms. Then you have to pull yourself over to the refrigerator, pantry, whatever it is, and get food out without using your legs. And then you have to climb up into a chair and eat that little snack without using your legs. Your legs just kind of have to get drugged behind you and be loose and flimsy like spaghetti. Pretend they're not even there. All right, you ready? All right, go ahead and pause the video and go do that stuff. I'll be waiting for you. Baby shark, baby shark, baby shark. Oh, are you done? Okay, great. How'd it go? Was it easy? Was it hard? Yeah, it was pretty hard, right? If you're saying it was easy, I know you're being silly. That's a hard thing to do, to not have your legs. Can you imagine having to go a whole day without using your legs? How about a week? A week without using your legs? A year? A year would be a crazy long time to not use your legs, right? Well, our Bible story today is about a person who wasn't able to use their legs for 38 years. 38 years is a crazy long time. You see, there was this guy who just lived on a bed by a pool. All right? Now, pools are pretty cool, right? Here's our pool, and we'll draw some water in there. And other people would come and hang out in the pool because they believed that the pool had magical powers. Now, we don't know if the pool actually had magical powers. My guess is probably not. But they believed that it did. And they believed that if you were sick or you had any problem, like you were blind or you couldn't hear or you couldn't speak, that you could just go swim in this pool, and then every once in a while something magical would happen and you would get those abilities back. And so this guy, he would come and stay by this pool all day long, hoping that somebody would help him get into the pool, and then he would be healed. But nobody ever came to help him. However, a certain someone came by and decided to talk to him. And who do you think that guy was? Hang on, no spoilers. I'm almost done drawing him. Oh man, this is not our best drawing of this guy, by the way. But we will make it work. It was Jesus. I know, not my best Jesus. Anyways, Jesus comes by and he says to this guy laying on the mat, he says, hey, do you want to be better? Do you want to be healed? And the guy says, well, yeah, of course I do, but nobody will help me to get into the pool. And Jesus says, well, then pick up your bed and walk. And guess what? The guy does exactly that. He picks up his bed and he just starts walking. Now, I need to emphasize something to you. This was not as big of a bed as you sleep in every night. This bed was more like a yoga mat. Have you ever seen a yoga mat before? This is Mrs. Amanda's yoga mat. It's basically just like a rolled up thing that's not too hard to carry at all. But this guy would carry this around and sleep on it. And so this guy, he hasn't walked for 38 years. Jesus tells him to get up and walk, and he just stands up and starts walking with his mat under his arm. Hang on, I'm drawing it right now. Oh, hang on, smiley face. There we go. Look at this guy. Looks like it's a surfboard, right? It's not a surfboard. It's his bed, all right? So this guy, he's walking, and he's carrying his bed with him. But then there were some guys that showed up. And these guys, who wore kind of funny hats, they were not too pleased with him. You see, these guys were called the Pharisees. All right, almost done here. Little feet. There you go. There's a Pharisee, and there's our guy. Now, Pharisee was an interesting word. The Pharisees were these guys who loved rules. Kind of weird, right? Do you like rules? Your parents give you rules, your teachers give you rules, all sorts of adults give you rules. Do you like them? Well, it's actually not weird to like rules. You should like rules. Rules help your life to be easier, believe it or not. Your parents give you rules because they love you and they want to keep you safe. God gives you rules that keep you safe and actually, believe it or not, make your life easier. Because if life didn't have rules, things would get really crazy really fast and it would be really dangerous. So, it's a good thing to like rules. As a matter of fact, imagine if you were playing a game like soccer, for example, and there were no rules. Well, you would try to just, kick the ball into the net and you wouldn't use your hands. But imagine that I came by and said, there's no rules. And I picked up your soccer ball and I threw it over a fence and I said, that's 10 points for me, I win. You gotta have rules for a game to make sense and for a game to be fun. Same with life. God gives us rules to protect us, to keep us safe, and your parents give you rules for the exact same reason. And the Pharisees, they loved rules. They thought rules were the best thing ever, and they knew the Bible really well and knew all of the rules and tried their best to also keep all the rules. You know, there was this one rule that said you had to honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy, which is a good rule. Basically, what God was doing was he was saying, hey, I want you to have a day of rest. I want you to have a day where you can relax. You can just spend time with family. You could have some fun, and also you can spend time with me. And so what the people of Israel would do was they would follow this rule and not go to work. They wouldn't work on their farms. They wouldn't work in the markets. They wouldn't do any work at all. They wouldn't go fishing, anything. Instead, they would just relax and have some fun, and then they would go worship God with other Israelites. It was a good rule to have. But the Pharisees, they loved this rule a little bit more than everybody else. And they, on the seventh day of the week, which is what day? Saturday, they would add all these extra rules that kept people from doing any kind of work. So let me tell you about some of these rules they wouldn't let people do. They wouldn't let you burn anything. You're like, that's okay. My parents let me burn stuff anyways. That's an easy rule for me to follow. Good for you. Stay clear of matches, right? They wouldn't let you write down anything, though. You couldn't write your name or anything else. You couldn't cook anything. You couldn't get a haircut. You couldn't cut your fingernails. There was all these rules that they added that you had to follow. But you say, Pastor Charles, that's a weird thing to do. Why would you add rules? Why would you make somebody else follow extra rules? And why would you want to follow extra rules too? Well, think of it this way. Imagine you have a cookie jar in your house, and your mom tells you not to get cookies out of the cookie jar without asking her permission first. Well, let's say that you're really good at following that rule. Good for you. You should be proud of yourself that you're good at following that rule. But your brother decides that that rule ain't good enough, and that not only should you not get cookies out of the cookie jar without permission, you shouldn't even go into the kitchen. Because if you go into the kitchen, you're too close to the cookie jar, and you got to stay far away from the cookie jar. So you go into the kitchen to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and your brother yells at you and says, "Get out of the kitchen, you're breaking the rules." Your mom didn't make a rule about not going into the kitchen to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Your mom made a rule about getting cookies out of the cookie jar. But the Pharisees, they were taking rules that God made, like don't work on the Sabbath day, and adding all these extra rules too. Well, that's a problem. And as a matter of fact, they saw this guy who Jesus had just healed, and they said, "Hey, why are you carrying your bed? You can't carry beds on the Sabbath. In fact, you couldn't carry anything. If you had a rock in your pocket and they found out, you were in big trouble, because carrying anything was work on the Sabbath to them." I mean, they made up the silliest and most ridiculous rules, and honestly, people really stopped enjoying the Sabbath. I mean, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you not enjoy that day anymore if there were so many rules you had to follow? That's what happened to them too. The people of Israel ended up not resting on the Sabbath and not enjoying it and not enjoying the time they spent with God. Instead, they were so focused on all these rules they had to keep because the Pharisees told them they had to. So when they told this guy, "Hey, you're not supposed to be carrying your bed," they got mad at him. And when they found out that he had been healed by Jesus on the Sabbath, they got mad at Jesus too. And it was this whole mess, all because they added extra rules that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So what does that mean for us? Well, to keep it simple, rules are a good thing. Like we said, your mom and dad have given you rules. God has given you rules to protect you and keep you safe. However, adding unnecessary rules makes our lives harder, and it makes life harder for others around us. So, obey the rules that God has given you, your parents, your teachers, that other adults give you, but don't make up rules just for the sake of having rules, or make up rules that keep you even further away from disobeying. Because all that does for yourselves and the other people who you force it upon, your friends, your brothers and sisters, it just makes life harder, it makes life less fun, and it makes it so that the actual rules in our life, it seems like they're not as worthwhile and not as important. So, that's my takeaway for you this week, is simply follow the rules, obey the rules, but don't create new rules, extra rules that make life harder and more difficult for everybody else. Now, in the weeks to come, we'll talk more about the Pharisees, and you'll see how they and Jesus had a lot of interesting discussions because they did not agree on this. But I think you should get some of these rules out of your system. Sure, follow your parents' rules, follow God's rules, but wouldn't it be fun if you could make some silly rules up that you had to make other people follow? Not mean rules. I mean, you don't want to make other people do mean things or bad things, but just some silly rules. You know what you should do? And then send pictures of to us? You should send us pictures of you making other people do absolutely silly rules. Not for a long time, but maybe for about 5 minutes. Make other people do silly rules. So, for example, maybe you make your brother wear shoes on their hands for 5 whole minutes, and they have to walk around and touch things with their hands, but their hands are shoes. Or you make your sister spell the entire alphabet backwards. Oh, that'd be really silly. Or perhaps you make your dad sing the Baby Shark song for 5 whole minutes. Oh man, if you guys could send those pictures and or videos to us, we would love to see them. I don't know if we'll be able to show whole videos next week, but we can try if you send them in. So send that to this link. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.